All right, we're live. This is Ron, and yeah, let's talk some recovery tonight. I'm glad to be here. This will be my first time with a live guest, but a live guest will become a regular part of my monthly times with you. My name's Ron Williams. I'm a certified addiction recovery coach with a history of addiction. And so we're here tonight, and I want to let you know a couple things as we get started. As you join in, if you don't mind, if you can let me know in the comments where you're joining from, I'd really appreciate that. I'm trying to see what parts of the country our broadcast is reaching. And so I would be interested in knowing where you're from. Um, And I have a guest here tonight with me. Her name is Elizabeth Williams. Now, it may be obvious to you, but we do look a lot alike. Can you tell that? Elizabeth is one of my four daughters. She's number two of four. And Elizabeth is my guest here this evening. We are going to be talking some, having a bit of a discussion about the role that isolation plays in our addiction and the role that healthy community plays in our recovery. And I want to let you know while you're here with us tonight, um, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to put those into the chat. Now, there is about a 30-second delay between us speaking and what pops into the chat. So if you ask a question, it may take us a minute to see that, but we will respond, and we'll be happy to answer questions or speak to any comments that you may have this evening. So I'm going to take a minute. Elizabeth, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself, and yeah, let us get to know you.
Okay, well, like Dad said, my name is Elizabeth Williams. I live in Venice, Florida. I've been here about 4.5 years now. I mean, I love living in Florida. It's amazing. But no, I work in construction, which is a high stress situation that tests my patients every day. um, most days at least. But I am in a 12-step program. I do work in an active program, and that is an active part of my life. I have 5.5 years, I guess. I'm sitting at about 5.5 years now. Um, Drug and alcohol free, so no nothing. So that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, no, I live in Venice, Florida, the beautiful Sunshine State. I have an amazing boyfriend and a beautiful puppy dog, and three, I just call them stepkids, but they're not my kids. So, yeah, just a lot of life down here and a lot of love in life because I'm 10 minutes from the beach. So yeah, does that count? Is that enough?
Yeah, now that you've successfully made us all jealous. Um,
Right.
yeah, and so, um, yeah, so what we want to talk about tonight, what I'm interested in hearing about is I want to begin by talking about isolation. Was isolation, did that play a role in your addiction? And I'll just begin by sharing a couple things, making a couple comments here. Um, I have four daughters. I told you Elizabeth is the second of four, and four daughters. And my daughters have, for most of their lives, they've had some rough spots, but for most of their lives, they've been extremely close. And even after their mother and I divorced, They were extremely close, and everybody did a lot together. And so there was a point, though, a number of years back, you were married at the time, and uh, it was just common for all of us to get together, not just at holidays and events like that, but just to randomly get together and hang out, spend time together, go out to eat, that kind of thing. And there was a point there where we began to watch you drift away from that interaction and from that connection. Um, Sometimes in the beginning, you would still show up at events, but you were distant, you weren't interacting like you had in the past, and you were quick to cut out. You didn't stay long a lot of times. And then it moved to eventually where you didn't show up sometimes when we were getting together. And I'm not saying these things to make you feel bad or to shame you. I've got a history of addiction myself, and isolation played a big role in my addiction. I think it does in with all of us. So, but I'm kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on isolation and what was taking place with you at that time.
So, early on when I did start, because my memory's kind of spotty. Full disclosure, my memory gets a little spotty in those days due to what I was deciding and choosing to do with my life at the time. Um, One, at that point, we could split hairs as to whether or not that was deciding or choosing, or if that was, in the depths of my addiction. But point being is I was in the depths of my addiction at that point. And I would remember when things would come up or when we would get invited to things. I would want to go. I would have that longing in my heart to go and to be present with people that love me and with my family. So in the beginning, when I started to isolate and started to kind of pull away, a lot of that was because of the guilt and the shame I felt because of the decisions and the actions that I was taking outside of when I was with family. And then
Mhm.
eventually, when I was with family, I was still making those choices and those decisions, which led to me cutting out quicker than I typically would. So it was one of those things where even seeing you guys and even seeing my family being around me and being happy and present with each other, there was such guilt and shame in the back of my mind where I couldn't stand to look at you guys because of the own shame that I was feeling in myself. And then it got to the point where, I needed to leave because I needed to go get a drink, or I needed to go, like I needed to get away because I needed to XYZ. But I remember when that isolation escalated towards the, thank God, end of that journey, when my mom, and this is one of those things that I didn't remember, and I was just talking to someone else a few days ago, and it reminded me, I got reported missing. Do you remember that, Dad?
I don't remember the specific thing you're talking about. I remember, though, your husband at the time thinking you were not knowing where you were at, and me driving down the highway in the emergency lane looking to see if your car had run off the side of the road. But that's a different time.
Didn't know that story. The more you know. Um, this particular instance, I remember my mother reported me missing. And we lived in Clark County, Indiana at the time, and I had to go down to the courthouse and meet with a sheriff. And mom was there, and he had to physically put eyes on me, and he pulled me away from my husband at the time and was like, "Are you being held against your will? Are you okay? I need to check, you know, like he was looking for tattoos. He wanted me to show him a tattoo to prove who I was." And then, of
Mhm.
course, now knowing that my mother filed a missing persons report and had to go through and explain the location and the style and the design of the tattoos that I had at the time, so that if something were to happen, they could identify my body. Um, so that now today is really one of those instances that I can recognize the effect that had, that isolation had not only on me, but on those around me, and being able to actually see how far my addiction took me down that rabbit hole and how isolated I did become, that I literally was reported as a missing person because no one had seen me, and I wouldn't answer my phone because of the guilt and the shame. And I knew you guys were going to find out that I was doing things. Oh, Hope. Oh my gosh. I love you too. I'm so glad you're here watching. Um, oh, and my bestie's on here too. Hi, fam. Um, but yeah, just remembering the guilt and the shame that I would associate with the choices that I was making at the time, and the unbearable, gut-wrenching, like, ugh, that you feel in your bones, because the guilt and the shame that was just pouring over my body because of choices I was making.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, it seems like I have some vague memories of that event you were just talking about. Um, yeah. And things like that did take place. That instance that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Um, your husband at the time called me because he couldn't locate you and you weren't answering the phone. And and yeah, and I ended up leaving work, driving to where you were living at the time, and then driving 15 mile an hour down the shoulder of the highway looking for any sign that maybe you had run off the road and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, but our reactions were because of what we were seeing take place in isolation. You know, in my own addiction, I lived in isolation, but my isolation looked a lot different than yours. I was in a position where I was surrounded by people all the time. And if you had asked anybody, nobody would have identified me as being in isolation. I interacted with people, I was surrounded by them, but my isolation took the form. In fact, everybody would talk about what a great listener I was. I was actually pastor of a church then, on staff at a church. And people would talk about what a great listener I was. What nobody noticed is that I never opened my mouth and said anything. I didn't share anything. I was
Mhm.
isolated in the sense that people were around me all the time, but I kept everybody at arm's length. I
Mhm.
didn't let anybody in on anything that I was struggling with or that was taking place in my life. Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think, what's your opinion on why? You've talked about this a little bit already, but what's your opinion on why we do that? Why in our addiction do we tend to isolate? Any thoughts there?
So, um, I'm watching the comments too, Dad. So hi, Aisha. I'm trying to make sure that I shout out to all my people that are commenting.
Mhm.
And I love the support and community, which we'll get into that later. But I just love the support in the community that I have around me. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out.
Mhm.
Um, but as far as I think for me, the cause of that isolation, was today I can recognize that it was a lot, that guilt and shame, that fear of being found out, that
Mhm.
fear of the people closest to me who love me the most and know me the best, that you guys would see right through me. And ultimately that's what happened. My big sister is ultimately the one who recognized what was happening in me and got me a bed, to where that was the beginning of my recovery journey,
Mhm.
was because my big sister saw right through me. And I'm sure a lot of you did. But shout out to big sis Rach, um, for recognizing that I was no longer myself. And again, that guilt, and yeah, Jade, I know you get me on the guilt, but that guilt that you Because for me, I knew in my heart that I was not making decisions that were healthy for me, for people around me, for the path that I wanted to take, for the person I wanted to be. But
Mm-hmm.
I physically could not stop. I could
Mm-hmm.
not stop. And on top of the not being able to stop, there was a lot of guilt associated with that, and fear and self-doubt associated with, I'm an adult. I'm a grown person.
It's okay.
Why?
You can say grown ass woman. That's all right.
I was a grown ass woman at the time, and I didn't have the willpower. I didn't have the self-knowledge. I didn't have the drive, the gumption, whatever you want to call it, but I couldn't stop me. I could not stop me. And there was guilt associated with that, and the fear of, if I can't stop doing this now when I want to, what will it take? Like, what's going to happen for me to actually stop? That was
Mm-hmm.
probably one of the first moments where I realized, without even knowing at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and without getting too far into my story, things not pertinent to our topic, but I think that was one of the first moments that I realized at the time, or realized, now, that at the time was when I was isolating to that extent, and I knew I couldn't stop, and I knew that I knew I was digging my own grave.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a part of that isolation as well stemmed from, I didn't want you guys to watch that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The love that I had, for it, thank God I am blessed with, or higher power, or whatever you believe in. Um, for me, I choose to say God, but thank God for the love of my family that I do have, to where I experienced those experiences in isolation. I experienced the guilt that I experienced, and the shame, and the self-deprecation, and the fear, and the doubt, and the worry, and all of those experiences and all of those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the lifting of the blinds, like the falling of the scales from my eyes, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
recognize, I'm gonna bury myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the things with me in my isolation, in my type of isolation, being surrounded by people, but not keeping everybody at arm's length emotionally,
Mhm.
not communicating. Somehow I was convincing myself, and I like Mark's statement
I
there. He said,
just
when you
saw that.
isolate, you don't have to pretend in front of others. And
Yes.
somehow, in our addiction, we lie to ourselves constantly. And what's
Ugh.
amazing is that we're the only people that believe the lie. Nobody else, everybody else knows we're lying. We're the only
It's so
ones that believe the lie that's coming out of our mouth. And
And you're so
I was,
convinced.
yeah, I was convinced that nobody would find out. And in my case, nobody had any idea what my struggle was, but everybody knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
Everybody knew
And
something was wrong.
to Mark's point, I mean, what a slap in the face, because that's the other side, is you're trying to put on the face and be the person that everyone knows you as. And if anybody knows me, I am outgoing, I am bubbly, I like to be, typically, well, I don't always like to be, but typically I'm the loudest one in the room. And that, I mean, it's a personality trait, take it or leave it, you get what you get with me. But it's one of those things where having to pretend, and again, like I was saying a minute ago, to coincide with Mark's point, having to pretend like, oh, I'm still me, but looking at those pictures of me in those days, my eyes are dead. There's no
Mm-hmm.
light there, there's no life there, there's no joy there at all. And then pretending, and then knowing that my people, and in this instance, my family, that you see right through me. You see right through me.
Mm-hmm. I actually was just in a discussion with somebody recently. just this past week, and they have struggled some with alcohol, but their primary issue has been sex addiction. And they were a little over, with the sex addiction, a little over 20 years since the last time they had acted out. And
Wow.
and they begin to they recognized they were drinking too much. And then
Mm.
the wife was out of town one weekend, and they ended up in a massage parlor, and and ended up um, acting out. And they blamed it on the alcohol. I would not have done it if it were not for the alcohol. But we know, all of us know, alcohol doesn't make us do things we wouldn't normally do. It has to be present there
Mhm.
in our hearts and minds already. It just lowers the barriers and makes it easier for us to step into the behavior. But over the next few months, he acted out several more times. Each time he drank right before he acted out, but then he had an occasion when he relapsed without alcohol in his system, and it really made him stop and consider what was going on. But where I'm going with this is that he immediately moved into isolation, and he had been surrounded. A community had been played a major role in his recovery for 20 years, and he
Mhm.
immediately moved into isolation. And the fear was, especially after all those years of sobriety, if I tell anybody, they're all going to reject me, and
Yes.
especially with his wife. And he just a couple months ago, he met with a group of men, confessed what was taking place. They kind of pushed him to be honest with his wife. And
Mm.
he was actually away on a business trip at the time. And he called his wife and told her, when I get home, we need to talk. And she said, you know, I haven't heard those words in 20 years. And last time a prostitute was behind that. And he replied, it's not a prostitute, but it's very close. And but he said that what happened is, with the men he had confessed to, and then even with his wife, he said his wife's response was, finish what you're doing and come home, and we'll talk about things then. And he
Mhm.
said, I could hear in her voice, he said, what I didn't hear in her voice was judgment or shame. And he ended up in a residential treatment program. He is back in community, back surrounded, but the fear was rejection, that
Mhm.
everybody would just throw him away, would throw him out because of his behavior. And
Mhm.
man, I think that's a big fear for all of us.
Well, and especially being, I mean, you said it earlier, you were a preacher, you were a deacon in the church. You were, we were active growing up in the church. And of course, with that kind of upbringing, I'm not supposed to be I'm not supposed to be doing the things that I was doing. So yeah, for sure, being a part of it and playing into that role of a fear of rejection,
Mm-hmm.
fear of being cut off. And like you said at the beginning of this, is we've always, I have three biological sisters. I have two, so I have five total sisters, because I have my two stepsisters that have been around forever. But the fear of that rejection from them and from my parents was huge. I knew I wasn't going to be rejected by my husband at the time, because he was in the depths of that. Jerry put it well. Hi, Jerry. That cunning, baffling, and powerful disease where, he was in the depths of that with me. So I knew I wasn't going to be rejected by my husband at the time.
Hmm.
But knowing that those people that love me, outside of that one person, if they found out what, they wouldn't talk to me anymore. If they knew what I had been doing, they would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed
Hmm.
of me. But oh, most definitely that fear of rejection from our loved ones and from our people is huge.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I want to jump back in here real quick. I want to let everybody that's here know there is a delay between when we speak and when you hear us and see us. There's about a 30-second delay. But I do want you to know if you're here and you
Mhm.
have any questions or any comments, feel free to put those. You've already interacting in the chat. But if you have any questions or comments, put those in the chat. And when they pop up about 30 seconds later and we see them, we'll be glad to respond to those. Um,
Yeah,
and
speaking of, hi
so
Sam. Sorry.
real quick, and I want to pivot and move towards the role the community has played. But as we're doing that, what did you experience when people found out about your addiction? You had worked so hard to hide it, you had isolated, separated yourself from everybody, and then all of a sudden, people find
I got
out.
arrested.
Yeah, it becomes public.
Hmm.
How did you deal with that? How did people respond when that happened?
Um, for for what it's worth, I don't my memory gets hazy, right in the beginnings of all of that when I first got into treatment and I went to the inpatient, and all of that, my memory's fuzzy. But I can speak on, I did move into a halfway house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Hope House, wonderful facility, wonderful people. It was an amazing experience. That was my first, I want to say that was my first experience of community outside of family. And to be honest, people took it differently, but they didn't, not one person was disgusted, not one person was ashamed of me, not one person, I did have a couple of people say, I love you, but I can't be around this right now. And that's perfectly okay. But it was led with, I love you, but I can't be around this right now. And
Mhm.
several people did say that. And that was a beautiful, I mean, it was not beautiful at the time. I was fuming, but that was a beautiful experience to where I was able to see that loving detachment or detaching with love, that's what it is, that detaching with love that people, I've heard people talk about in recovery and in the community is detaching with love. And that was one of the first moments where I experienced being detached from with love. And then of course getting into the Hope House, that I was in there with some beautiful women. Um and being able to share stories and share experiences and be able to recognize that like their stories were so very similar to my stories and that things were very similar to our experiences were so very similar. And then to take it a step further, when I did actually stick and stay in the rooms, and in the 12-step program that I'm a part of, again, that level of community that you experience and that level of, here's a word for you, acceptance, that level of acceptance that you get in, in whatever works for you. And, it may be church, it may be a hiking group, it may be a 12-step program, it may be therapy, whatever that is for you. Finding that group of people that will literally just love and support you, and be behind you no matter what you tell them is one of the most freeing experiences I have ever had in my life.
Mhm.
Being able to sit and talk to people and be able to share these experiences that I've had and then 9 times out of 10, somebody goes, "Oh, I got one too." And they share the same story with something that's a little different and it's,
Hmm.
a little worse or a little better or what, but there's that shared experience that I know I get to draw from to where I get to recognize that one, I'm not alone. I am not alone. Two,
Hmm.
there are people out there that are going to love and accept me no matter what. And it might take you a minute to find them, but you're going to find them if you're looking. And then three, even with like where I'm at in my recovery today, I can accept me for where I'm at. And I think because of that, I think that opens a whole new door for people to accept me where I'm at as well. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Hmm. Yeah.
Did I go on a tangent?
I saw a question there a minute ago. Um, Somebody was asking, did you know that that last time was your last time? It was something to that effect.
Oh, um, in the moment, I did not know that my last time was my last time. Um, in the moment, I did not recognize that. And honestly, for the first couple days afterwards, that I would not have recognized that that was my last time. It was my my oh shit moment, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, I was driving down, I think it's US 27 in Ohio. And I was in sales at the time and I was driving down the highway and I was praying to God, if this is a problem for me, strike me with lightning, that foxhole prayer that I think a lot of us have heard about. And I did not get struck by a lightning bolt. My tire didn't blow, nothing crazy like that. But there was like a calm quiet and it was almost like a voice, like an inner voice that told me, all you have thought about is, for me, it was drinking without consequences. All you have thought about is drinking without consequences. And it was in the calmness. I didn't have the radio on and it was January, so it was freezing, the windows were up, and it was in the calmness of my car driving down the road that it there just that overwhelming inner voice told me that. And that was when I was like, holy crap, that was my last drink. There's more to that story, but we certainly do not have time for.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was probably the moment that I recognized that that Sunday night football game was that was my last time.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to take a turn. I want you to talk. Um, I want you to talk for a while about the importance of community in your recovery and in your long-term plan. But I am an ex-pastor, and every once in a while I'm tempted to climb on the soapbox. And can I do that? Can I do that just for a minute tonight?
Just
Is
for a
that okay?
minute.
Yeah. Here's the thing. We always move towards isolation, and isolation is always a killer. It kills us emotionally. It kills us spiritually. Um, it is always unhealthy. In fact, one of my little pet peeves, the United States is the only first world country today that uses solitary confinement in their prison systems and in their jails.
I
Every
didn't know
other
that.
first world country on the planet recognizes that when you place somebody in solitary confinement, and I'm saying some people are just so dangerous, you don't have a whole lot of options. But to place somebody in solitary confinement just for punishment, um, they always come out of that cell worse than when they went in. Isolation is just it messes up our heads, and I take that back to all the way back to Genesis 1. God has created everything. He's created the entire world. He's created the sky. He's created the water, the dry earth, all the animals, all the plants. He's created everything except for man and woman. Don't want to leave woman out.
Yeah, yeah.
more important than us men are a lot of times. But there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God's standing there looking at everything, and he said, everything is good. And then he makes a statement. In verse 26, God says, let us make man in our image. And I always ask people, who's he talking to? There aren't any people yet. There's no Adam, no Eve. God is talking to Jesus and the Holy Spirit. That idea of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I see somebody says we froze, and that may happen on occasion. But Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and the idea there is God has lived in perfect community since the beginning of all time. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And when he looks out and he says, let us make man in our image, I'm convinced that a part of that image is living in healthy community.
Mm-hmm.
It's living in connection with other people. We are created for that. What our hearts long for, and a lot of people get confused over this word, but what our hearts long for is intimacy. And I can't speak for women. You can speak to that in a minute if you want to. But for men, when men hear the word intimacy, they think women. And it's connected to the bedroom. They're thinking sex, intimacy. But that's not the definition of the word intimacy. Intimacy has nothing to do with sex. There's a therapist by the name of KK Ray. She's out of Tennessee, and I've had a chance, opportunities to study under her and observe her in the past. And she uses a definition of intimacy that I love. It speaks to my heart. She says intimacy is the idea that I want to be with you and you want to be with me. And in that connection, there's no fear of shame and no fear of judgment. She says that is intimacy. That is community. That's what community is intended to be. I want to be with you. You want to be with me. And there's no fear of judgment or shame. And I would argue that that's what all of us long for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're all looking for.
And I think I can agree with you that when you hear the word intimacy, your brain does go, like for me as well, it goes to sex. But I've gotten this newfound joy of looking up the actual definitions of words.
Mm-hmm.
And in my brain, if I look up intimacy, it's gonna say sex, and that's not the
Mm-hmm.
case. So it is one of those things to where, like she said it so perfectly. I want to be with you, you want to be with me, and there's no shame, there's no judgment. It just is. So being able to recognize using that as the definition, I have friends that I get to be intimate with. I have family members that I get to be intimate with. And I have these people who will meet me on that level and not have the shame and not have the guilt to be able to cultivate that community, and that sense of acceptance, that is just such a beautiful, peaceful thing that we get to experience today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure. Oh, Sam, I'm not getting into the cop story. It's off topic.
So let me ask you, let's switch gears because we're going to end up running out of time here this evening. But what are your thoughts on community? What's been your experience with community, and what role does that play in your life today?
So when I first got introduced to recovery, I found a beautiful group of amazing people up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they were my, you hear people say, or in certain rooms, you hear people say, I'm going to love you until you learn to love yourself. They were the epitome of that. And we would do kayaking and canoeing trips, and we would go camping, and we would, we would do game nights every single weekend. We would have a game night, and it was the height of COVID. And we decided that we were going to do things at my house every Wednesday. We were going to do something at my house every Wednesday night. And then Saturday nights we were doing games, and we would go out to dinner after meetings, and we were together, but we were together and having that fellowship, that true sense of, I know where you're at, you know where I'm at, so let's hold hands while we walk this path, you know. Um, that was probably, at that point, that was the second time. Um, but the first genuine time when I was in recovery, truly in recovery, where I was able to experience and see that people were around me because they just wanted to be around me, you know, because they knew and understood what I was going through. And then to take it a step further of being able to take it a step further of being able to, sorry, my phone said I had 25 comments on this Facebook thing, and I was like, what? But anyways, it being able to, I made the decision in my first year of recovery to move to Florida. And I was down here visiting, and I was looking for somewhere that I was going to feel comfortable, that I would click with people, and that I knew, that I could develop that community, because it is such a, without even knowing it, I knew that that was such a big part of what was going to help me continue in this experience of recovery. And I found a place, and there were a couple women that I'm, still friends with today, with a couple of them, and a couple of them are no longer, no longer here, no longer with us. Again, like Jerry said earlier, this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. But I went to a specific place, and I met some beautiful people, and they took me to a bonfire, and I met some more beautiful people, and I got back to, where I was staying that night. And Nick, hi Nick. Um, but I got back to where I was staying, and I was staying with my mom and my stepdad, and I was like, I can move here. This peace came over me to where I knew I could move here because of these beautiful people I had just met, and that I knew that I would have that community. And at that point, I didn't recognize what that was. I didn't recognize the importance of that. Um, but over the course of the last couple of years, with experiences that I've been through, and going right back to that knee-jerk reaction of mine of isolating, realizing how important that community is. My most of my recovery community, probably not most now because I've been in Venice for a couple of years, but a lot of my recovery community is still 45 minutes south of here, and being able to recognize today how important it is to show up at the birthday parties or at the pool parties, or oh, I'm spinning on my side of Facebook. Are you spinning?
Nope. Things
Okay,
look good on
perfect.
this side.
Okay. So, being able to go to those events and go to those functions, and to be able to be present with the people that are my community, that are my people that listen and don't judge, that are my people that are they're just there to love me, and I get to just be there to love them. Um, you feel, it's like your cup is overflowing, it's like my level of peaceful and contentedness that I have with my life today, that I'm able to have these beautiful people around me in all aspects of my life. I have my recovery community of people that I lean on heavily, and that community is large, and I have, at home, I have someone who understands 12-step program and recovery, to where there's that sense of community in our home as well, to where we're able to, love and support each other and be present for each other and be that sense of community for each other as well. So knowing today, through the experiences that I've had the last couple of years living in Venice, and with, things going on in life, and with, different moving parts of everything, the community to me is vital. And that's another word that I love the definition of. Vital is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of I need this for because it is life or it is death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Community is vital to me today. Without it, it would be death, you know.
Mhm.
And it probably wouldn't be quick. It'd probably be a slow digging of my own grave.
Yeah. I do know early on, back in the days when you were in Fort Wayne, um, and I know early on when you moved to Florida, um, participation in groups were an important thing for you.
Mhm.
Does that still play a role for you? Groups? Is that still something that is a part of what you would classify as community today?
It is in the sense that I get to lean on those groups. So like you touched on earlier that people would tell you that you're a good listener, but you weren't saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, that group setting is very important because not only are you hearing what other people are going through, but that gives you, again, that judgment-free space to be able to say, this is what I'm going through and I don't know what's happening, or I just experienced this and I'm struggling with it, or you know, whatever the case may be. But that gives that for me, the groups give a safe space to be able to say whatever is on my heart, whatever, you know, I feel needs to be said. Um, and 9 times out of 10 for me, when I speak on something, you know, you're getting approached. After the group, you're getting approached. You know, someone's coming up to you
Mm-hmm.
and sharing some experience or saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing." So I think that plays a lot into it as well because you have not only the opportunity, and I see Aisha just kind of touched on it, you not only have the opportunity to get that support from them, but for you to provide that support for someone else, like, you know, in the community you provide for others is so precious.
Mm-hmm.
So that in and of itself, being able to be present for others, you know, not only gets me out of self and gets me out of that self-pity and that self-righteous, that, you know, that wheel of me, because I'm the most important person on the planet. It gets you out of that and gets you into more of a sense of, let me support this person. Let me just shut up and listen for 5 seconds to hear what's going on with this person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the group settings, when utilized in a manner of knowing that it is support and that it's not always, let's keep it frank here, it is not always judgment free, and it is not always, you know, it's you know, there are certain things that are supposed to be left in those spaces. There are certain things that you say with the expectation and the anticipation that it will be left in those spaces, and unfortunately they're not always left in those spaces. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing too, is being able to, higher power has a real great sense of humor and knows, for me and my experience, to put people in my life that I know when I say things to them, it stays with them, you know? So that's a lot of it too, is taking, if it weren't for the group, I wouldn't have my core community of people that I lean on. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I wouldn't have met these beautiful people that I know and that I love, and that when I'm going through it, I can call them sobbing my eyes out. Or, you know, I can lean on them through whatever experience I'm going through and be able to air all of that out and be and have them be present for me in the same way that I get to be present for them. So it's a give take when it comes to that community. And I think a lot of that is recognizing that there is, you know, like over here, I'm over here, like, I need help, you know, this is what's going on. And then again, 9 times out of 10, if you're on a one-on-one, if you're in a one-on-one or in a group setting, it flips into, well, that's similar to this, and I need help with this,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, give me 2 seconds, you guys.
Yeah. You know, I was introduced to, I worked I was executive director of a recovery facility back in the 80s, but I was involved there as a guy who read a book about about recovery and who was supposed to be the expert, but didn't realize that I was struggling with addiction myself.
Right.
And later, my addiction resulted in me being sent to prison for 2 years. And I was introduced to group meetings by my parole officer when I was released. Um, I
Didn't
was
get that
told
part.
you will attend meetings or you have 8 years hanging over your head and you'll go back to prison. And so I began my involvement with group meetings under the threat of my parole officer. But there came a point when I recognized my need for that community and for that group. And for a long time, I was in group meetings because of a fear of relapse. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in a meeting, I will relapse. I have to have these. But it's kind of, I still, it's been years now, and I do a couple meetings online every week, but I have a Monday night group that I attend every week that I've attended for years. And it's kind of a joke when we do our check-ins at the beginning of the meeting. I will check in, hey, I'm Ron and I'm here, but it's kind of a joke. If I don't follow my typical pattern, I get called out because I will tell them I used to come to meetings because I felt like I had to. But I come to meetings today because this is where my family's at. This is
Mm-hmm.
my safe place where I can be honest, where I can be vulnerable. And then I always throw in there, and if I live to be 100, because I'm the oldest guy in the meeting, if I live to be 100, one of you young punks will be pushing me in here in a wheelchair. And it's
Mm-hmm.
turned into a joke where every week as everybody's coming in, they'll pick the guy that's the youngest, and somebody will come up and slap him on the back and say, "Tag, you're it." And
You get to wheel in Ron next to, when he's old.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
But it's that idea of community, not, and for a period, it was, I really felt like I had to be there to survive. Um, but today I'm there because that's where my family's at. That's where
mhm.
people are. And there are people, like you said a minute ago, there are people that don't follow the rules exactly.
Yeah.
But the people in that group will come to my aid in the middle of the night or on a Saturday or whenever quicker than my flesh and blood. Most of my flesh and blood will. It's where I
I'm
found
states
family.
away. I'm
Yeah.
states away. But something I do want to touch on that I would be remiss if I didn't touch on it. Sorry, my back hurts, so I gotta adjust. Um, Miko, go. Something I would be remiss if I didn't touch on it is the another A word that I love that we haven't, I don't know how in 53 minutes, but accountability.
Mhm.
I think that that's another huge part of the community, you know, setting and the community relationships that you develop is that accountability that you get out of these people that love you and that you in turn love, because again, back to the beginning when I was sharing about not being a part of and isolating and making sure that you guys didn't see me and Mark made that point about not having to pretend. These people that I've surrounded myself with and that is possible for everyone to surround themselves with, they see you. They see you. So when things do start to get a little wonky, when things do start to get a little, sideways, or you're kind of wobbling on the beam a little bit, or whatever the case may be, you have that accountability. I'm not to name names, but I have a particular friend who's been huge in my life, and she loves to isolate. And we joke about it when we call her out on it because she's like, yeah, 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 I know, I'm an isolator, but I just don't like people or whatever, whatever excuse she gives us for the day. But the people that she has surrounded herself with, we harass and we poke and we prod and we say, come on, we're going, or hey, we're hanging out, or why aren't you answering my calls? Or we call back to back to back to back to back, or someone else that is very dear to me, likes to climb under their blankets and just isolate and not be a part of. And well, I'm busy at work or whatever baloney excuse they want to give us. But the kicker again is I can still text you on a regular basis and I will still send you 30 long minute videos, checking in and seeing what's going on because I have the accountability with that person to be able to call them out. There's that level of intimacy to be able to call them out when they're in their moods because I know for certain they do it for me when I'm in situations that I need to be called out on. And what a beautiful place to be with the sense, with the community that we have, that you have that again, that give take that you get from these beautiful people that you surround yourself with. Now, again, to touch on it one more time, not everyone is that level for you, and that's okay. Not everyone has been that level for me, but today I can't tell you how many people I could call right now, or at midnight or at 1 o'clock in the morning that I could call and say, I'm struggling. And like you said, they'd be there at the drop of a hat,
Yeah.
or I
Yep.
can wake up and roll over and hit my boyfriend and be like, "Ugh, I'm struggling. This is where I'm at. But again, that sense of community and that sense of support, where if I start to get feeling a little froggy, the suggestion will be made, hey, how about we hit a meeting tonight? Or if, I start to pull away or isolate, hey, I haven't seen you in a little bit. What's going on? But again, just that huge, huge part that we get and the accountability, the acceptance, and all of that being found in community.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, we're coming up. I got a couple things I need to say before we wrap things up, but then I want to turn things back over to you. So while I'm talking, you think about how you want to close things out.
Oh
But
no.
you want your final word to be here to people tonight. But a couple things, just as we're coming towards the end. Um, at the beginning, and you may not have been here at the beginning, if you get a chance, and you don't mind, if you can shoot a comment on just where you're checking in from. I'm trying to keep track of where people are coming into the meeting here from. I would invite you, if you're not doing so, to follow me here at RW Coaching. I am here every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're talking topics of recovery once a month. I will have a guest with me, like Elizabeth is actually my first guest, and she hasn't agreed yet, but I will be asking her to come back in the future and to talk some more about some things that are important to her in recovery. I do have guests already lined up for October and for November. But if you're not following me, I invite you to do so. I'm here every Tuesday evening to talk recovery, and yeah. And this video, the recording of this will be up on my page on Facebook for 30 days. Facebook will allow this to stay posted for 30 days and then they automatically delete it. So if you know somebody else that you think this would be beneficial for, feel free to share it. It'll be up there. I think they'll still be able to leave comments or ask questions. And if I see those, we'll get back in touch. And you can, if you have any specific questions, you can feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or through Facebook Messenger. If you have questions for Elizabeth and you don't have her number or email, you can shoot a question to me and I will see to it that she gets that. And we'll try to respond to anything that you have. So you've got the last couple minutes here, Elizabeth, and they're not going to cut us off if we go over. I don't think they will. But what is there anything that's on your mind that you haven't addressed here this evening yet?
I just want for me, I would hope that people understand and not even understand, but that people can recognize that we do recover. There is a solution for people like us, whatever your struggle may be, whatever your addiction may be, whatever is going on with you. We don't have to isolate. There are people that understand that will, relate to whatever it is that you are experiencing, whatever it is, whether it's we've touched on sex addiction, we've touched on alcohol, we've touched on drugs, there's whatever it is, shopping, I don't care what it is. There is a solution. There is a community out there for you. Just go out and find it. And if you need help with that, by all means, reach out to me. Whatever works for you is a beautiful, wonderful thing. I know what has worked for me, but just know that recovery is possible for everyone. Community is possible for everyone. Community is it's so empowering to experience the levels that you get to, the level ups that you get to go through with these people that you get to surround yourself with. It's possible. There's a way out for whatever you're dealing with. You are loved with whatever you are dealing with. And there will always, always, always be people that will love and support you exactly where you are. You just got to find them.
Yeah, that sounds good. I appreciate that, Elizabeth. I thank you for being here with me this evening. I appreciate what you've had to say, and a little prejudiced here, but as your dad, I'm proud of the person that you are. And yeah,
Thank you.
you're pretty amazing. And so I thank you for being my first guest here on Let's Talk Recovery. And I look forward to having you back with me in the future. So I need to
Sounds
wrap
great.
things up. I appreciate everybody that's been here. Thank you for the comments and the interaction. And I hope to see you back again next week. She
Thanks
is
for having me,
amazing.
Dad.
She's a lot more amazing than me. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye, everybody.